Welcome to the latest episode of Call to the Bar, International Law Over Drinks. This is a roadshow episode because I am an intrepid adventurer off to Newcastle and Manchester in seeking methodological insight. And so while I'm here, I've decided to talk to the local international lawyers to see what's going on. So let's get down to it. Now I'm here with Cris. So Cris, I'm going to get you to answer some questions. First of all, tell us, you've been on the podcast before, but tell us who you are and what you're currently working on.
Okay, hi, I'm Cris van Eijk. I'm a PhD at Newcastle University, and at the moment my main project is my PhD, which I'm distracting myself from with a couple different chapters on various kind of peel-off projects.
So talk to me about your PhD. What's your PhD focusing on? What are you doing with it? What are you trying to achieve at the end of this, apart from being called Dr. Cris?
And hopefully not depression. So my PhD title is The Environmental Othering of Earth Orbit under International Law, and it's sort of a critical approach to outer space law, but very much taking sort of an environmental law approach, looking upwards. And what I'm kind of doing is looking at the historical development of the Outer Space Treaty in particular as sort of the constitutional document in space, and sort of how environmental discourse worked in making that treaty, kind of countering an idea that environment didn't matter back then. And so what I hope to do with it is sort of end in a place where I can establish that environment, in fact, has been part of the space discussion for a very long time. And there is no sort of legal separation between Earth and environment in any sort of meaningful legal way, which then begs questions like why we don't do environmental law in orbit, or why no state does EIAs past establishing the orbit itself.
And does that mean that people should be doing kind of environmental assessment for, ASAT weaponry?
Well, people shouldn't be doing ASAT weaponry, it would be my answer to that. But for instance, the sort of no state involved, especially states like the US, which has 73% of active satellites, they don't do EIAs once sort of launch is over, which is a very specifically defined point, and even up to the point where launch is over, the EIAs that they would require under U.S. law are being really aggressively curtailed. And so effectively most states, as well as the U.S., don't even do the due diligence that they should, which, considering things move 22 times faster than an AR-15 round, might be important.
Might be important, but it also means that there's no tested environmental impact if a satellite has a rapid, unscheduled disassembly in flight. So I think that's the technical term, isn't it?
That is, or anomaly sometimes, just to make it mysterious. So there is a tested method, to be clear. We know best practices exist sort of when things are still in the atmosphere, and there are kind of approaches in terms of debris mitigation that are taken in space, but all of that is still done by space companies themselves, and then the regulatory approach is pretty much, we trust you, bro. And the two things are specifically missing, which is really important if you think about space as common, or a commons, is public participation and peer review, which are just nowhere in that process.
Yeah, and I've watched Aliens. There's no way I'd be trusting the Weyland-Yutani Corporation to do their own environmental impact assessment test, because they thought bringing back a bunch of aliens was a good idea.
Right.
And that's corporations in a nutshell there. So
yeah.
All right, that's a really interesting and important PhD. I'm really looking forward to hearing about how it all progresses over time. But what are you doing when you're not being a PhD candidate here at Newcastle Law School and working on that?
Yeah, so this summer I did a lot of reading, fantasy mostly, some sci-fi, but that's a bit close to the day job. And so I just finished reading Catabasis by R.F. Kuang, which was maybe a bit closer to the PhD than it should be, especially because I did a law degree at Cambridge, which was too close to home. But so a lot of reading.
Fantastic. Reading is, I think, a fairly featured distraction on the pod itself. Mm. And now for the final question, I have to ask you, wombat, emu, kangaroo, koala, echidna or platypus, which one and why?
So I have to say, being sort of an anti-colonial sort of theory-inspired scholar, there is sort of some basis in which political violence must be necessary, and I have to say emu, because at some point they fought off the white man and won.
I believe there was 2 emu wars that they won.
Yeah. So I'm going to have to say the emu.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for talking to the pod.
Thank you so much.
So, you've been on the podcast before, Matteo, but just for our listeners who may not remember that episode, which they should, but they may not, do you want to tell me who you are and what you're currently working on for Santos?
Hi, I'm Matteo Bassetti. I am currently doing a PhD in human rights and working on trans rights and the pathologization of trans people.
So, what does that mean? What is pathologization, and how is it inflicted upon trans people that you kind of found from your PhD? Just very quickly.
Yeah, mainly it's the characterization of trans people as diseased and mentally disordered. And what I'm looking is at how states condition legal gender recognition and also acquisition of rights to the fulfillment of medical treatments and medical diagnoses. And in particular, I'm looking at how human rights bodies assess that and more or less fail to consider trans people's rights fully from a hopefully queer perspective. I'm not exactly sure if that always works, but
queer perspective in human rights is always hard because we keep coming back to the law won't save us, and the liberal rights regime is oppressive in its own special way, so it's always a tension there.
Yeah, and especially I think that for me it's been really challenging to do this research in the UK, and kind of like I started with this more like positive outlook as like, oh yeah, human rights can do something for us, and then the whole transphobia shit show came down in the UK, and so I think I really shifted my understanding towards like how can we use the human rights language also to find our own agency and recognize as a community that the state has inflicted harm rather than really hope for to be saved by human rights bodies.
Yeah, that makes sense. And for any of our listeners who want to get a taste of what this PhD will look like, Matteo has an excellent chapter that opens up the queer encounters with international law book on trans pathologization and the right to life. But moving on from this, what are you currently doing when you're not dealing with the shit show of human rights law and trans lives? What do you do for yourself to kind of unwind, relax, chill out, apart from listen to Call to the Bar, obviously?
Definitely listening to Call to the Bar. But I was recently in Melbourne for a visiting, and my housemate got me a tiny watercolor sketchbook. So I've been sitting in cafes doing watercolors a lot and drawing your fantastic microstate, and then just do something artsy and try to unwind through that.
I'll definitely be putting a photo of that painting of the Free Pirate Floating Republic microstate up on Blue Sky so we can link it in the show notes because it is amazing and excellent. And for the last question I'm asking in this roadshow, so emu, echidna, platypus, kangaroo, wombat or koala, which one and why?
Platypus.
Alright, tell me about why the platypus.
Because it's cute.
It is so cute.
Just because it's very cute, that's it.
That's it? That's all. That's the only reason I need for the picking of any of these animals, and particularly the platypus, which is super cute.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much. Alright, so we're here with another Roadshow interview. So, Cristy, do you want to tell me who you are, what you're working on?
Yes, so my name's Cristy Clark. I'm at the University of Canberra for now. And my research broadly sits in, I guess, the intersection of environmental law and human rights, mostly at the international level, but you always have domestic implementation and feeding ups that I look at as well. Why I'm here at this conference is that I'm talking on a panel about prefigurative methodology and utopia, the politics of utopia. In the last quite a number of years now, a lot of my research has ended up engaging with prefigurative theory. Initially, I guess, really with prefigurative politics, looking at the way that people use these sort of temporary manifestations of a future ideal that they would like, and by creating those temporary manifestations, think Occupy with its encampments and this kind of ideals of how democracy might work, they be the change that they would like to see in the world. And as I've explored that a lot more, either implicitly or explicitly in my work, I've started to become a lot more fascinated about academia's role in actually itself engaging in prefiguration as a method itself, or a methodology really, and so that there's actually an intention to create a theory that could become the change that we would like to see in the world, or in legal academia, or in international law, for example. So that's why I'm at this conference.
Oh, that's fantastic, and that sits really interestingly well with a book chapter I've got coming up with my PhD student Joanne Stagg, where we wrote on utopian and dystopian global governance using fiction and then reality colliery, but Joanne in that paper made the point that utopia is a process and requires ongoing commitment to process, which kind of sits really neatly with what you've been talking about there as a really interesting concept on how we use these ideals and utopias to generate change through that commitment to process.
Yeah, and I think it's one of the things that I was interested in exploring when thinking of this this paper is the fact that we use utopias, or these ideas of these ideals in the future, or in an alternative concept like in fiction, really as a juxtaposition to the present. It's a method of critique, but it goes beyond your standard critique, because through the articulation of this other utopic ideal, we then start to actually embrace a commitment to some kind of transformation or radical change. And so we actually take, I guess, the risk of hope. And so it's quite different from your standard kind of critique, which one of my reflections was, I think that critique in and of itself is a bit safer. We can feel a lot more kind of cynical and worldly when we're engaging just in straight up critique. But if we're more willing to pin our kind of hopes and dreams to the wall, I think there's a risk inherent in that. You start to be seen as a lot more naive and a lot less serious as an academic when you engage in that kind of thinking. Yeah,
you kind of get the people critique of your work of, but I have to live in reality.
Yeah, and I mean, you see that all the time in political debate, but it's classic in Australia between the ALP, the Australian Labor Party, and the Australian Greens. And you'll often see the Labor Party members talking about pragmatism as some sort of notion of seriousness, and of people in independent movements or in the green movements as not being actually in touch with reality, or not being held to account for being able to really do what they talk about.
And pragmatism is held as virtue.
That's right, yeah. Whereas I actually think pragmatism is one of our biggest problems.
I can see the argument. The more I've been kind of working on impact of law on society, because that's kind of a key feature of my work, the more I sit there and go, law's fucked. Like I said, there's a reason I have a paper that literally talks about how law is actually a tyrannical force in society. So, yeah, I get it.
Yeah, the risk of reinforcing the status quo, even as you critique it, when you're not willing to embrace radical change as a possibility, I think is inherent in the process.
Yeah. But moving on from what you're working on, which is super interesting, and I'm really looking forward to hearing the paper tomorrow and reading it when it gets published, what are you doing away from international law and academia to maintain your hope and your kind of joy in life?
I feel so nerdy saying this, but I actually get it from my work in academia. I keep having these moments where I think, how long am I going to get away with doing this work that is a little bit quirky, a little bit out there, and actually escapes from all of those things that I do think of as being a bit oppressive about legal academia. And I think it's through collaboration with other scholars and the very social element of those collaborations that I do get a lot of that hope. I also have a podcast with one of the people that I collaborate with, Law at the End of the World. And I think through that we interview other people, and the level to which people actually do get an enormous amount of optimism and hope from the work that they do is really reassuring, and I think it gives me a sense of hope with it. Beyond that, I'm really boring. I just like walking.
I love walking. I moved from hiking to interrupting my walking with golf, but I love walking. So totally on board with that, and it's an excellent podcast, and our listeners should go give it a listen. So I'm going to, plug that. We'll put a link to it in the show notes, and so our listeners should definitely do that. So, last question for this roadshow: emu, platypus, kangaroo, wombat, koala, echidna.
Echidna.
Which one and why?
Echidna. One, I've always been obsessed with echidnas, and the most basic reason is that they have the cutest faces in the world. I love the way that they walk. They like womble. They kind of like wobble along, and they're kind of like moseying around. Kind of, you just want to know where they're going and to follow them. But then, in addition to being total munchkins, they've got these awesome spikes. I love that juxtaposition. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, and when I lived between Bungendore and Braidwood, I used to see them all the time when walking my dog, and the Admiral was always like, but I want to play with it, but then it stabbed me in the face, but I want to play with it, but it stabbed me in the face, and she couldn't cope with this, but it's not playing, it's just stabbing me in the face, why won't it play? So I get that one totally.
Yep.
Thank you so much for having a chat with Call to the Bar.
Thank you.
And I'm just here with Emily. Emily, for all of our listeners, you've been on the pod before. Do you want to just remind us who you are and what you're doing and working on at the moment?
Yeah, great. Well, hi, everybody. Nice to be back on the podcast, one of my favourites. My name is Emily Jones. I work at Newcastle Law School. I do a lot of things, and I find it quite hard to describe myself these days. But I'm mostly an international lawyer. These days I'm mostly doing feminist, queer, post-human, environmental law stuff. Yeah.
So unpack that. What does that mean? Environmental law, post-human, feminist stuff?
Well, I think part of the reason I kind of say stuff is because I like to just do whatever I'm interested in at the time. And yeah, at the moment I've been doing a lot of work on future generations as a concept in international law, and kind of thinking about how it's potentially anthropocentric, how we decolonize it, how we queer it. Also thinking a lot about family abolitionism and future generations. What does that mean?
I am here for family abolitionism.
Totally, right?
Yeah. Like, the family is the site of so much trauma and abuse for so many people that...
Exactly.
Like, fuck that noise.
Exactly. So how can we just get rid of the family?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm here with you. I know many people wouldn't be, but I'm here for it.
Good. I'm glad to hear someone's on my side.
I'm absolutely on your side. It is the queerest approach to it.
Exactly.
So, what are you doing when you're not being an international lawyer? What do you like to do with your time outside of, destroying the family and, the British way of life?
The British way of life. Yeah, got to destroy that, especially these days. Yeah, lots of different things. I really like weightlifting, as I think I've talked about before on the podcast.
You have, and you and Juliet would have that in common. Yes. She loves to lift.
Exactly. I also live close by the sea. So I have spent the summer, which we're coming to the end of now, learning to surf. I'm learning to scuba dive. So just doing lots of sea things, which is fun.
Scuba diving is amazing. I miss scuba diving, as we've discussed before, because I can't equalise pressure every time, and it just gets upsetting when I have to abort a dive. But it is amazing, and I can highly recommend find a reason to do some research field work in Seychelles and actually just spend every morning diving.
That sounds like a great plan.
Yeah, I can absolutely recommend it from personal experience.
Yep. All right, I'll have to follow you up on that.
Yeah, and so for our last question that I'm asking, so emu, platypus, echidna, kangaroo, wombat or koala, which one and why?
Okay, so I had to think about this because you asked me this yesterday because you told me about this question, and I was originally going to say platypus because platypuses are really cool, and actually they're just kind of strange, and I love them. But then I asked you what an echidna was because I went to an Australian zoo and saw different animals, and I did kind of know what it was. But then you reminded me that it's kind of like a hedgehog thing, and maybe I'll go with that because I think spikes are cool.
Yeah. Look, I am here for the echidna and the spikes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
It's a great form of self-defense.
Yeah. Just be so spiky that people can't approach you.
Yeah, I'm into that.
Yeah. Who isn't?
Exactly.
Who needs therapy when you have spikes?
Who needs therapy when you have spikes? That's a good line.
Awesome. Thanks so much for talking to the pod again.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
So I am here with Matilda. Do you want to introduce yourself to our listeners of Call to the Bar and tell us what you're working on?
Okay, sure. So my name is Matilda Arvidsson. I'm a legal scholar based in Sweden. And what I am working on, so I am knitting for sure. And I work on international law, on post-human feminism, on AI, and as of lately, gardens.
Okay, tell me about working on gardens. Is that a personal project or a legal project?
Both. So working on gardens for me, in terms of international law, has meant to tell the story about how international law and the history of botany has very similar trajectories and roots, collecting specimens from around the globe, displacing them and putting them on display, but also how international legal architectures legal architectures often come with designed gardens, and how these gardens tells us different, very particular stories about what law is or ought to be, at least in the terms of the designed and envisioned by the designers. So, but then on a more personal note, of course, it's also been a story about how gardening is part of our colonial effort. And as someone who comes from the global north, so coming from Sweden, I also have a personal history of being part of the colonizing movement. So my ancestors and also my immediate family are part of colonizing movements and are colonizers themselves, and what that means to live with that, what it means to live in relations with the gardens of my own life, and what kind of hopeful and joyous relations one can have with plant lives.
Fantastic. So what are you doing outside of international law in your academic work to kind of decompress and, rejuvenate and those things to keep doing your academic work?
I hang out with the cool people, so the other cool people doing interesting work. And knitting has been one of these projects where I've been knitting for years, as many do, as an intergenerational practice. And when I was working with AI, so AI and law can be a bit dry perhaps sometimes, but working with that made me frustrated enough to go into the history of women knitting and coding and using knitted code as anti-surveillance practices and intelligence practices. So then I just knit for pleasure and as a method of connecting.
Fantastic. That's really cool. And so now for our last question: emu, platypus, koala, kangaroo, wombat, or echidna? Which one and why?
I had echidna. I had such a wonderful encounter with an echidna, very surprising. I thought that echidnas would never go up to a person, but one did, and it just stopped close to me, and I was just amazed to be sort of approached like that. So that encounter has stayed with me, and so it's the echidna for sure.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for having a chat with me for Call to the Bar.
Thank you.
And I'm here with Juliana.
Hello.
Juliana, do you want to introduce yourself and tell our listeners what you're working on at the moment?
Yes. So I am very glad to be back with my wonderful host, Tamsin. So I am a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Cambridge Centre for Gender Studies.
And do you want to give us your full name for the listeners
Yes.
who don't remember you?
Yes, my full name is Juliana Santos de Carvalho, but it's fine. All of the gringos cannot pronounce my name, so Juliana is just alright.
Yes. Exactly. And what are you working on at the moment?
So, what I am working, that's a great question, right? I have a book contract, so
Excellent.
I am working on my book, which I am supposed to finalize by summer 2026. So please stay tuned for weird approaches on what international lawmaking means. Yay!
Excellent. We'll keep an eye out for that, and we'll have to do an episode on your book when it's done.
You are too kind, but yeah, let's see how that goes.
So you're just mostly working on your book?
No, actually, I am. What am I? So Tanya Alberts from the VU, who's also been my academic fairy besides you. We've been working on a deep sea mining thing.
Oh, fantastic.
So that's it. That's all I'm working, and then just teaching kids at the undergrad. Sorry.
Fair enough. What are you doing when you're not doing all of those worky things to unwind and relax yourself?
I told you about. Oh, sorry. I forget that I told you that I was reading The Fairies Much, but I am done with that because it's very bad. So do not read that. But I'm now in the hyper focus of the Earthsea novels. Because I had read the Wizard of Earthsea first, and now I just finished Tombs of H1, and now I'm on to the next book. So I'm just like, yay, magic.
Excellent. Excellent. And so last question.
Yes.
Platypus, emu, koala, echidna, wombat or kangaroo. Which one and why?
Are the wombats the ones that are smiley?
I mean, I think they are. The wombats are the ones that are like little brown tanks and waddle everywhere.
No. Then a koala. I'm sorry, I'm a basic bitch. I like the koalas, they're cute.
That's good enough reason
I'm
for
sorry,
me.
I'm just like
Don't
a-
be sorry.
Oh,
You
God.
can like what you like.
And you can be basic.
That's
Sorry.
right. Yes. Oh, thanks so much for joining us on
Thank
the podcast.
you for having
again.
me. Yes.
And I'm here with Louisa. Louisa, do you want to introduce yourself to the Call to the Bar listeners and tell us, what you do?
Exciting. So my name's Louisa Dassow. I am a Northern Bridge PhD student at Newcastle Law School in the UK, and I am in my second year of studying a post-human feminist approach to the new BBNJ Treaty, or Ocean Biodiversity Treaty, or Global Ocean Treaty, whatever you want to call it. I'm having a lovely time doing that.
I think we generally go with BB&J, but I'm open to other alternatives. What does this post-human feminist look at the BB&J treaty mean? What's it look like? Tell me about your PhD.
So I'm effectively doing a textual analysis of the treaty and looking at how the legal subject is constructed within it, but I'm using a post-human feminist methodology to achieve that, which means I get to bring in elements of lots of different critical lineages, including decolonial theory, queer theory, intersectional feminist theory, ecofeminist theory, multi-species justice theory, and I get to mush them all together into my analysis. But making sure that I'm following and attentive to the different power hierarchies that are being constructed. This means I get to talk about the role of technology, introduce a more than human contribution to the analysis, and comment on late stage colonial capitalism.
That sounds really interesting, and I'm looking forward to reading it when you turn it into a monograph after you've finished. And for any of our listeners who want to know more about post-human feminism, you can go back to our season 1 episode with Emily Jones, where she talks about all of the post-human feminism and international law work that she's been doing. So, when you're not doing post-human feminist analysis of the BBNJ treaty, what do you like to do with yourself?
I like to get in the sea, so I do quite a lot of cold water swimming up here in the cold north of England.
Yeah, did you ever get warm water up here?
No,
I was going to say.
But that sort of emerges from, I do a lot of underwater photography whenever I can get into warm water.
Yep.
So it sort of follows that stream, and otherwise I'm reading or sitting in a field.
Any particular preferred category of or genre, like we'll discuss genre at another time, of reading that you enjoy?
I like to have 2 non-fiction and 2 fiction books going at any one time, so that I can pick the genre depending on my mood.
Fair enough. I could not cope with that, but I'll let you go with it. And is there anywhere that our listeners can look at your underwater photography?
I have an Instagram account called Point and Bubbles, with lots of fishy photos.
Fantastic. We'll put a link to that in the show notes so that our listeners can go have a look at your underwater photography. I know I'll be checking that out. And now to our last question. Emu, kangaroo, echidna, wombat, platypus or koala? Which one? Why?
Wombat, because of their interesting digestional tract.
The square poo.
Square poo, yeah.
Yeah.
And the fact that when they're being rehabilitated as babies, they have to be carried around in a sling and hugged.
Oh, that's very cute. They are super cute. I often see them when I'm out walking the Admiral, and she wants to play and the wombats do not, so I have to make sure that she doesn't go too close to them, because I'm pretty certain the wombats would win if they didn't want to play.
Yeah, but also shout out to all of the others. I love all of them.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for joining us on Call to the Bar Roadshow.
Thank you for having me.
And on this Roadshow episode, I'm also here with Gina. Gina, you've been on the pod before, but do you want to just reintroduce yourself to our listeners and tell us what you're working on at the moment?
Yeah, hi Tamsin, nice to see you. I'm Gina Heathcote, and I'm a professor of public international law at Newcastle University in the UK, not Australia. And what do you want to know? What I'm working on at the moment?
Yeah, what are you working on at the moment?
Well, probably the best thing to talk about is the very final stages of Volume 2 of our co-authored manuscript on the law of war and peace, a gender analysis. So this has been in the writing, or maybe it's better to say the thinking, since 2021, or maybe before, when the first volume came out, and I'm now tasked with the last 2 weeks of just checking some of the formalities around the bibliographic material. So it's quite a relief to get to this point.
I can imagine it would be. What can we expect to find in the book when we pick it up and read it when it comes out?
So the book, one of the critiques of the first book on the law of war and peace, a gender analysis, was that there was an overemphasis on war rather than peace. Perhaps not surprisingly, because that's where law tends to put its emphasis. So we wanted to really think about peace, and so this book becomes a way of thinking about queer feminist peace and how it sits and integrates, or perhaps critiques, international law. But rather than going through the regimes of post-conflict kind of legal structures, so peace agreements, peace building, peacekeeping, which is maybe where we thought we were going to start when we put the book first together. So it's co-authored with Dr. Emily Jones, Dr. Sherry Levinsky, and Dr. Lucia Kula. We had this great workshop at Newcastle in March 2023, and through our interactions with our participants on the workshop, the structure of the book changed. So it starts with looking at environmental insecurity as an issue, and then looks at food security, and then there is a kind of lengthy chapter that looks at both peacekeeping and peace building, and a final chapter on peace agreements. But that doesn't really do it justice, because it's intersectional, it's queer, it thinks about post-colonial feminisms, post-human feminisms. So it really is about, I guess, legal pluralism, plural feminist approaches, and a kind of puzzle and quest to, I guess, think through really consciously and carefully what that looks like in a legal analysis or a legal text.
Fantastic. That sounds really fascinating. We'll have to get all of you on to the podcast, do an episode on the book once it comes out.
That would be great.
And so, outside of working on this and your Queer Oceans Law book, which for our listeners who are interested in Gina's work on queer oceans law, you can go back to our episode in the first series about that. What are you doing outside of this sort of thing to disconnect and re-energize away from international law?
Well, maybe it's still connected to international law, but been spending a lot of time on the coast, long walks, swims. Seem to have an unspoken personal challenge of swimming in as many continents as possible in a given year, and I seem to be succeeding. So
fantastic. And for our final question of this little roadshow, emu, kangaroo, wombat, echidna, platypus, or koala? Which one and why?
Oh, well, I'm torn between platypus and echidna, just because they're strange kind of creatures, which I love. So I'm going to suggest an alternative, which is the potoroo, which is an Australian animal that maybe your listeners might like to go and find out a little bit about.
Fantastic. Thanks so much for joining me on this Roadshow episode.
My pleasure.
And continuing this Roadshow episode of Call to the Bar, I'm here with Paola. Paola, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us what you're working on at the moment?
Yes, thank you very much. So I am Paola Zichi. I have a British Academy postdoctoral fellowship at University of Warwick at the law school. I'm now working, so I just finished my book, so I am in a transit phase. And I'm so the book is just out and is titled Feminist Governance and International Law, a Critical Legal History of Mandate Palestine. So that is what I've been working on until today, basically.
Fantastic. I can say as an editor in the book series that it's published in that it's a fantastic book, and our listeners should definitely go give it a read. It's worthwhile. Are you happy to have moved on from that? Are you looking forward to your next project?
I actually am, but I'm also happily sit with the fact of how the book, the book is out, it is what it is, and I'm happy about it. So, yes, I'm ready to move on. However, it's been a wonderful journey, starting from my PhD until now to publication. So,
what do you think you'll be working on next then?
My next project, which is the one based at Warwick, is going to be about feminist lawyering and international law in 20th century Europe, and basically looks at biographies, and in particular a biography of 5 Jewish feminists and the way they approach the law. So thinking about whether the experience of discrimination and persecution and migration in Europe has shaped in any way the approach both to the law and to feminist gatherings. And I think, although it doesn't seem right, a continuation of the previous book is still very much linked, because the question underneath is whether certain experiences, broadly speaking, how do they impact in what we're looking for when we look for the law.
Fantastic. So it's kind of going to be a form of legal life writing and legal biography of key figures in feminist international law. Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing how that project develops. So when you're not doing this thinking and writing on history of feminist international law and legal engagement, what are you doing to relax and unwind?
All right, thanks. So I normally try to run fast, and normally I don't manage, so my run normally lasts 10 minutes, then long breaks, and then another 10 minutes. So it's kind of relaxing.
Interval training.
So that's something. And then I live in London, so there is always something new to find out and to get lost a bit in the city. That's one way to unwind. And my favorite way to unwind is to take a plane and go to my island, Sardinia, and get back out of this, of the life that I live here.
Oh, fantastic. And for our final little question on the Roadshow, this Roadshow episode, emu, kangaroo, echidna, platypus, wombat, or koala, which one and why?
Right. So, as you already know, I might know 3 of them, and I choose koala.
Okay, why the koala?
No, so they kind of look cozy.
That's as good a reason as any.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Roadshow episode.
Lovely, a pleasure.
So I'm here with Hasret at Manchester Metropolitan University. Do you want to introduce yourself and tell our listeners what it is that you're working on?
Oh yeah, thank you. So my name is Hasret. I am a senior lecturer in human rights and gender at Manchester Law School at Manchester Metropolitan University. I've been here for 2 years, and I work on kind of 2 different projects. One of the projects I work on is kind of like looking at how the UN and also a number of states have tackle the problem of honor, which they have often equated with honor-related violence, and look at how that discourse is quite racialized and kind of rooted in anti-Muslim sentiments. But then I've done quite a lot of ethnography across 3 sites in Kurdistan, Turkey, and the Kurdish diaspora in Denmark, to look at kind of like the lived experience of people that live with honor and how it doesn't match the portrayal that we see in UN documents or that we see in policy documents in countries like Denmark. So that's kind of one of the projects I'm writing up at the moment. And the other one has been looking at the women's revolution in Rojava, northeastern Syria, and the kind of philosophy of genealogy and that kind of knowledge they produce.
Oh, that sounds really interesting. Do you envision the difference between how the UN's treating honour and the communities that use this are treating it ever kind of becoming closer together?
That's a really interesting question, and it's a kind of a question that lawyers really like, of synthesis. So every time they talk about human rights in Islam, is like, how are they compatible? How are they not compatible? I kind of treat... So the thing is that in Kurdish, it's not called honor, it's called namus. But that concept doesn't exist in English. The closest we get to is nomos, which is Greek. Mm-hmm. And nomos cannot be translated really, but it doesn't really map into the history of honor. So there's been a colonial mistranslation here. And my work is not one of kind of compatibility or synthesis, but I'm kind of treating it as 2 forms of life, 2 different ethical orders, with different aims and objectives. And I'm aware of the power differences between the UN discourses and people's everyday lives. So I also, I guess, attend to perhaps more to the problematics of that superiority that is embedded in the UN knowing better of how people live. So my work is not one of synthesis or compatibility. In fact, my work is one of trying to refigure that relationship.
Fantastic, that's really interesting. I'm going to have to go read that work because I'm really fascinated. When you're not working on these international law problems, what do you do to unwind and relax?
I love baking. Yeah,
yes.
So I bake a lot. I've gotten really into these Irish scones with raspberries.
Gorgeous. As a former French pastry chef, French-trained pastry chef, I am all for the baking.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, I love baking. So that's probably what I do most, is actually it really helps me, other than cleaning and doing some bit of exercise, but baking is my kind of therapy.
Yeah, I have former flatmates who used to be aware that I baked to de-stress, so they'd intentionally try and stress me out, so that I'd bake for them. So I understand that. Yeah. All right, now last question for this roadshow. Emu, kangaroo, platypus, koala, echidna, or wombat? Which one or why?
Koala.
Which one? Why a koala?
Because they're so cute. I don't know if they are cute in real life, but I really like to hug one.
They are very cute.
Yeah. Do they hug you?
You probably shouldn't. They're wild animals, and you don't want to kind of go in. But you can have in some wildlife sanctuaries the hug a koala moment. Yeah. Awesome.
Great.
Thank you for coming on board to the Call to the Bar Roadshow.
No, thank you very much.
So I'm here with Ash, again at Manchester Metropolitan University. Ash, do you want to introduce yourself and tell us what you're working on, so our Call to the Bar listeners can get a feel for your work?
Cool. Hello, Tamsin. So my name is Dr. Ash Murphy. I'm working on, I'm actually in a transitionary phase at the moment. I was very big into climate security and international security, and in the same way that you sort of transitioned away from it a little bit, I feel the same, that security has so many negative connotations now. I've sort of pushed myself in the direction of other projects that are less security orientated, like the regulation of artificial intelligence and geoengineering, and perhaps I'm looking at a project with regards to how these subjects are perceived in sort of the media culture and how that influences public understanding of what we need to do with regard to regulation going forward.
Fantastic. And you said you've just kind of finished up your climate security stuff. You've just recently published a book, haven't you, on this?
Yes. On the 30th of June, my monograph came out on climate security and the Pacific and Caribbean island states, which specifically looked at the concept of securitization theory and finding specific narratives which you could use to persuade those powerful nations which are less inclined to respond to climate change to actually understand that this is a problem for people on a really serious security level, and by mapping those narratives to sort of traditional threats like nuclear proliferation, terrorism and health, which have all come before, like the UN institutions, you could perhaps make a comparative argument that we need to deal with climate change in the same way. That has kind of been the mainstay of my research since 2015, the beginning of my PhD, and I feel like that monograph coming out was a natural end and a segue to look at international problems in a different context.
Yeah, and I can say that I was a reviewer on the book proposal, and it looks like an excellent book, and I'm really looking forward to reading it. And for our listeners who find it interesting, we'll put a link to the book in the show notes so you can check out Ash's excellent work there.
Awesome.
So when you're not doing geoengineering, AI, and other things around that regulation, and not doing international law, what are you doing to unwind and relax?
Good question. So I bought a house a couple of months ago, which is a complete renovation project. It's probably older than most of the structures in Australia.
Almost everything in the UK is older than most of the structures in Australia.
Yeah.
Australia thinks that 50 years is old.
Yeah. Sadly, my house is about 150 years old. So that's taken up a lot of time, but I really enjoy it because it allows me to sort of see projects come to life in a physical way that perhaps academia doesn't always. But I like climbing mountains. I spend a lot of my time outside. That's why I got into climate security and now geoengineering to an extent, because it's about protecting the green spaces and allowing humans to continue to exist outside, which is what we really want going forward. And unfortunately, that's a threat. So, yeah, I love being outside, swimming in lakes, travelling. I'm pretty cliched, I think, in my habits and behaviours.
Well, they're a cliche because they work, right?
Certainly do.
Yeah. All right. Now, final question for this roadshow interview: emu, kangaroo, koala, wombat, echidna, or platypus? Which one and why?
Definitely a kangaroo, because I hop around and do all sorts of silly things that I shouldn't do, and.
So it's sort of a kindred spirit for you.
Yeah, definitely. When I was in Australia and I hung around the kangaroos for a little while, I did very much think to myself that I move a bit like a kangaroo when I'm excited as well.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for joining Called to the Bar for this roadshow episode.
You're welcome.
All right, I'm here with Rosella. Do you want to introduce yourself to Called to the Bar listeners and tell us what you're working on and what you're doing in international law?
Hello everyone, my name is Dr. Rosella Pulviranti and I do research in international criminal law and human rights. I research on witnesses' rights and witnesses' protection in general. So at the moment I'm writing an article about when witnesses are involved in crimes in universal jurisdiction and whether, for example, they have a dual identity as also people seeking asylum, and so what are the legal framework, what are the problems related to their life and experiences in that journey.
So I have to ask at this point in time, how do you deal with witnesses who are also seeking asylum, and where do they get their asylum claim process? Is it in the Netherlands with The Hague or elsewhere? Sorry, I find that really fascinating.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's a good question. So I am working in Europe in general. So there are a few countries that have allowed asylum seekers, people seeking asylum, to be also witnesses in those universal trials. Yes, it's in the Netherlands. There are a lot in Germany. There have been some in the past in Belgium. So generally they are somehow linked to the colonial roots. countries that have both perpetrators and witnesses or survivors that arrive to that country, and then at the moment of the screening of the interview, generally the question is, have you committed an international crime? Because there is the exclusion clause in Article 1F of the Refugee Convention, but no one asks them whether they have been also victims of those crimes or witnesses and so on. So now there are so much influx of people seeking asylum in Europe, and the European countries are starting to devote some attention to universal jurisdiction crimes. So the point is that there is no legal framework. So the identity of those individuals is scattered. Sometimes they are people seeking asylum, sometimes they are survivors, sometimes they are witnesses, but we somehow are missing an holistic perspective on the problem. If these answer your question.
That makes a lot of sense. And do you expect we'll ever come up with a holistic solution to understanding these intersections?
Hopefully, yes, and a hope is what we can do as academics. There is, I think, what I say in the article is that they are an invisible category. So in general, in my research so far, I've been looking, at people seeking asylum and also witnesses. So generally, those are the forgotten categories. There is more attention on different type of categories in individuals. So the hope of having more attention on this problem, because also the data are so limited. I was literally reading footnotes in some reports of NGOs. So there is very little material. So the first step would be raising awareness, and then hopefully, yes.
Yeah. Fantastic. That's really fascinating, and please keep me updated on how that project is going. When you're not working on this and other international law problems, what are you doing to relax?
I do many things. I love art, I love music, so I tend to go concerts. So I went to a concert a couple of weeks ago about a band from Liverpool called the Red Rum Club. They were launching their new album, and I'm going to a concert tomorrow, Simply Red. In February I'm going to the concert of Mika, but then also going to the concert of Metallica in London. So lots of concerts. But I also like reading a lot and spending time with friends and a bit of outdoor activities as well. I mean, hiking is not the best in the UK because it's always... a couple of weeks ago I was in the Lake District and it was very rainy. I did not enjoy that, yeah.
No, UK weather often leaves something to be desired, doesn't it?
Yes, also to add, I like drinking tea because, coffee in the UK, we have been having a bit of a huge problem here. So since I've been living in the UK, I switched from drinking coffee to drinking tea.
And from my global travels, I can tell you, find a cafe run by Australians. They'll have the good coffee.
Good, we have one down here the road. I will try that. Thank you.
And for our final roadshow question, emu, kangaroo, wombat, koala, echidna, platypus, which one and why?
Can I please change the animal?
Go for it. Tell me.
I discovered that in Australia there is an animal called Rosella with one S, my name is with two S, which is a parrot. And it's very colorful and very happy. And so I feel like somehow he reflects who I am in life. So, yeah.
Fantastic. The Rosella is a bird that I know well and they're quite beautiful. So I am here for that as your answer.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me for this Call to the Bar Roadshow episode.
Thank you very much.
And I'm here with Lucia. Lucia, do you want to introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us what you're working on so that we can get an idea about your work and as you speak to Call to the Bar?
Thank you. I'm Lucia Kula. I am a lecturer in law and gender. I'm an international human rights lawyer. And what am I currently working on? I'm currently working on my manuscript, so developing my PhD thesis into a book. I looked at borders, law, and violence, particularly within the context of Angola, where I'm originally from, and the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo. And I look at how the law intersects with women and marginalized communities' lived experiences at the border. So what happens when the law doesn't necessarily dictate what citizenship looks like and how people experience violence, and the law doesn't offer enough protection.
That's really interesting, and I'm really looking forward to reading that book. And when it's done, let me know so we can do a kind of full episode talking about the book, because that's really interesting. And is there one key takeaway from your work on this that you'd be able to share with us?
The one key takeaway that I have really tried to hone on in the context of my work is the importance of lived realities, but also the importance of including the lived experiences of people who are actually affected by law in different ways into the scholarship, not only from a perspective of being subject, but also being authors of their own histories and their own stories. And for me, I think that has always been challenging, because I was always convinced that that is not particularly law, that is not particularly legal scholarship. And that is something that I'm trying to disrupt a little bit.
Yeah, that's really fantastic. And I'm looking forward to reading the book. When you're not working on these sorts of international law issues, and I know I can guess one of your things that you're doing to relax. I just had the delicious donuts that you made. What are you doing to unwind and relax and take your mind off these kind of heavy international law issues?
As you mentioned, I bake. I cook and bake, actually. I really love food, and I think if I had not been a lawyer, if I had not become a lawyer, I would do something with food. I love cooking. I love the science of food, but I also like the idea of what food creates in terms of culture, bringing people together, and it has been an integral part of me growing up.
I would say I share that, so I echo everything you're saying there, and food science is so fascinating.
Exactly. So when I initially started writing my PhD project, food actually became a really integral part of understanding my own lived reality of growing up as a refugee and being subjected to European cuisine, which I was not used to, of course, and the effect it had, for example, my mother on her health, and then food becoming such a central aspect of how we navigated issues around identity. So food has always been very important to me. I love cooking for others, and I love eating as well. So, and aside from that, I love sci-fi. I watch a lot of TV shows, movies, sci-fi, Stargate, Star Trek. Those are my comfort shows.
Love that. As I said, do you have a favorite Star Trek?
I would probably say, oh wow, that's really difficult, but maybe Discovery for now.
Okay, yeah. Mine's Voyager.
Yeah.
But we all have. There are so many good Star Treks out there. So now for our last question, echidna, platypus, wombat, kangaroo, koala. What was my other one? Emu. Emu. Which one and why?
Koala, and that's because growing up in the Netherlands, I used to watch a TV show, a cartoon called Blinkyville.
I remember Blinkyville.
Yes, and it was a koala, and I loved the song, Hey, hey, Blinkyville.
Fantastic.
So koala is my favorite Australian animal, yeah.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for joining us for this little Call to the Bar Roadshow.
Thank you.
So, I'm here with Kay. Kay, do you want to introduce yourself, tell us who you are and what you're currently working on?
Okay, thank you. My name's Kay Lawler. I'm a reader in human rights law at Manchester Law School. So broadly I focus on human rights law, but I'm a queer and feminist legal scholar, so I have a particular approach to human rights law, let's say. I focus on mainly gender and sexuality in international law and the problems, opportunities and other things that arise when we use human rights to talk about gender and sexuality in international law and in international and transnational spaces. At the minute I am finishing, I hope, my book Queer Interruptions in International Human Rights Law, which uses time and space to think about how we do sexuality and gender work across transnational dimensions of international law or transnational law.
Yeah, fantastic. And when it's done, you'll have to let us know so we can have you onto an episode just on that book.
I would love that.
So, because that would be fantastic. I think it's really interesting and I'm looking forward to reading it when it's finished. what do you do with yourself when you're not working on Deleuze is the theory that you're doing?
I do use Deleuze, yeah.
Yeah, and human rights and queer theory and international law. What do you do with yourself to not deal with the hellscape that is international law at the moment?
I feel like I'm going to give a very boring answer, and this is because I know that you're a fabulous chef and do blacksmithing and all the fun things. I like to go to the gym and lift heavy weights until I can't lift them anymore.
You, Emily Jones and Juliet McIntyre would both be right there with you in what they do, so there's nothing wrong with that.
It's really satisfying. Like academia, nothing's ever perfect and nothing's ever quite finished, whereas you can either lift the weight or you can't. I really like that. It gives me a break from it. I like to escape to the countryside whenever I can, green spaces, get out to the Peak District or to Wales and to lie in a field and just appreciate the air, the space, the not being in the city for a bit. I like to knit badly and slowly. I like to look after my millions of nieces and nephews who like to cause trouble.
Yeah, fair enough. Look, and that's completely reasonable. I mean, who wouldn't like to be around family and things like that?
Yes.
Yeah.
I saw a meme once about being a dual income lesbian auntie with no kids, and I feel that is my purpose in life, you know, to descend at Christmas with many presents and wind the kids up and then give them back to their parents. I'm good at that role.
That's pretty much what Melissa and I do. Yeah. We are on board with that. That we have dogs, we don't have children.
Yeah. But it's an important role
is.
within a family. You know, someone needs to fill that spot, and I feel
exactly. And we can do it while, you know, also, you know, making sure the kids don't entirely absorb all the heteropatriarchal normativity that they might get from their parents. At least that's what I do with my.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It is not unusual. It is not a surprise. It is completely normal for my nieces and nephews that they have lesbian aunties, and I'm really glad and proud that I can grow up being that example to them.
Excellent. And for our final question on this roadshow, emu, platypus, echidna, wombat, koala, kangaroo. Which one and why?
Oh. Are the wombats the one that do square poops?
Yes.
Wombat.
Wombat? Because of the square poo?
Yes.
They're also super cute.
That too, yes. I should have gone with cute, but no. Just the weird fact about them.
No, and that's completely reasonable. My puppy also quite likes the wombats and gets disappointed every time I don't let her play with them when we come across them while walking.
It must be amazing to live in a place where you can there are wombats there, like.
Yeah, there are wombats there are kangaroos there.
Yeah.
Sometimes I see platypus in the river, and things like that. It is pretty cool living in a semi-rural part of Australia.
I do not get that when I'm walking in the Peak District. I wish I did. Still beautiful. Everyone should visit the Peak District and the north of the UK in general.
Oh, and so the silly thing is that I get that, you know, kind of a town just outside of Canberra, and like along the river where it's like developed mid-centre of the town, you still get kangaroos and wombats.
That would be, sounds like paradise.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. Kay, thank you so much for chatting to Call to the Bar.
Thank you.
I find the flavour too strong.
Caramel. Oh, sorry.
That's okay. I'm just going to give it a few seconds so that Douglas can erase all of that from there, and then we'll get into it. I've already done a general intro for the episode, so I'll just start with that.